Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe for more quality content, and to share with your friends. I also encourage you to check out the playlist tab for more videos and to check out my books. I will put the link to my author page in the description. I'm Phoenix and welcome back to my channel, and today I would like to do a book review for the work Poem 3 AM, which was written by Bram Riddlebarger. And I'm very excited to review this book, so without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, I read Poem 3 AM by Bram Riddlebarger, and I read it because I was curious about the form, because I'm very much interested and intrigued by poetry. And I feel that there is a lot in poetry to be able to explore. And I was fascinated by the structure of this poem, which is a long-form poem split up by cantos. And there are about 56 cantos. And the format of this book reminded me a little bit of a personal epic. And so I was very excited to dive right in. Now, the book is definitely poetry in terms of how we think about elevated language, although what's interesting is when I'm reading the book, even though aspects of it seem to be very poetic in that classical sense of having elevated language, having words that are not common in everyday speech in a sense, that are a little bit more rich and dense, I still found that there was actually a very vernacular quality to this book. And so it's very interesting how this writer, Bram, is able to completely write using language that captures a lot of evocative imagery and evocative ideas, and the language itself of which is textured and rich and dense, while also having the feeling of vernacular language. And so I find that to be very interesting that he was able to accomplish this. I don't think it's easy to strike a balance between those two types of language. Part of the reason why poetry is often difficult for people to read is because it is too dense. But there are moments in this text where I feel as though I am having a conversation. And that is one of the great things that I think that you can capture in writing. Now, you might be wondering what rating I would give this book. I'm going to go ahead and give it 5 stars out of 5 stars. And the reason is because this poem gets me really excited about poetry and about the form of poetry and about all of the things that we can do with words and with poems themselves. And so I'm very excited that I was able to read this. It definitely gets my blood flowing. Now, aside from the language itself, there is one technique and strategy that I find very fascinating in this book, which is the long sentences. So if you were writing prose, you would be less likely to be able to get away with sentences that go on for pages, even though some writers do this, such as William Faulkner, of course, or surrealists. In fact, I believe that this book specifically was inspired by Richard Brautigan, among many other influences, and Brautigan definitely has an interesting prose style. But what Bram does with this book is capture longer streams of thought and sentences. So it's written like prose, basically depending on what you're reading. So Canto 36, you can see that it is prose and that it goes on for quite a while. And with examples like that, you realize that the book focuses on capturing thoughts that are uninterrupted. And this, to me, is what makes this book so poetic. It is able to capture this density of thought, and capturing that by changing the very grammar in which we use, the very sentence structure. And I think that that is remarkable to be able to accomplish. I think that poets might get too focused on conventionality, on conventionalism, and focus too much on things that are more familiar. But I feel as though this book, with the longer sentences, captures what you can do with words and sentence structure, grammar, ideas, language, poetry, and honestly, I really thought that that structure was effective. Now, the reason why I call this book, for lack of a better genre definition, or definition in general, a personal epic, is because Normally in poetry, we have classical epics such as Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad, such as poems by William Wordsworth, specifically the Prelude, such as Tasso's poem or other poems that you get. They're epics, and they're often narrative epics, so they're capturing a variety of not even just images, but also narratives. They're really trying to convey with poetry something grand. You know, Paradise Lost is another example by John Milton. But the personal epic was something that came about right about the early 20th century, where you take those expressive themes of the narrative epic and you basically apply it to your own viewpoint, to your own view of the world. So you basically make your own life a personal epic, for lack of a better description. And as Bram describes, this book is a song for the inferno in the Appalachian foothills. So there is definitely a personal element to this poem. And I definitely don't want to mischaracterize it. And, you know, there are certain connotations specifically with song. But the reason why I consider it to be a personal epic is not just its structure, which I described as split up into cantos, but also the very personal and I would describe personal qualities of life and experience that this book is capturing. And I think that that is a very remarkable theme. And so personal epics, you get poems such as Pound's The Cantos, speaking of cantos, and that specific word. You get John Berryman, and I would even describe Richard Brautigan as being as part of this tradition of where poetry becomes more than just, it becomes grand. It becomes, your own life becomes a grand narrative. Your own experiences and observations becomes grand, and to rival something like Homer's The Odyssey. And so I very much like it. I also really appreciate the honesty in this poem. I felt the honesty in this poem with just capturing human feelings was very refreshing, even if it was done in a way that was a little dense and complex with the language and with the sentence structure as I was describing, the grammar as well. I think that what makes this poem really interesting is something that Wordsworth himself focused on doing with his own writing, which was capturing the personal experience by way of poetry itself, and by way of the vernacular and by way of the very words that we use. And so the poem felt very personal to me. Even if I wasn't able to fully understand everything that the poem was talking about, I felt as though there were a lot of general descriptions that I could easily relate to that were true for anyone. And I do want to say that that does definitely contrast the imagery that is used to capture this specific place and time that Bram is describing. And I think that it's remarkable. I think a poet is very remarkable if they can capture all of these unique elements in a poem and make it all come together. So yeah, I very much like this book. It was published by Nihilism Revised, which has published a variety of other texts, and so often Nihilism Revised focuses on very expansive and expressive texts and a variety of texts. And so I was very glad to be able to read this book, knowing that the quality from Nihilism Revised is very high and very specific to the quality of literature and writing that we hope to find in the independent scene, in independent writers. And so I definitely think that it's very remarkable. And as I said, I have been very excited reading this book and thinking about it. There's definitely a lot to mull over. I don't think it's necessarily an easy book per se, but I do find it to be very relatable, and I think that is a great quality for a poet to have. So yeah, I'm Phoenix, and I hope that you enjoyed this talk. I definitely encourage you to check out this book on Amazon or wherever you purchase your books, and I encourage you to check it out. It definitely will keep you interested and intrigued as it did me. I'm Phoenix, thank you for watching. There is much more content to come, and I will see you next time.